Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Oddly Specific, the only podcast that covers everything from private equity to Pete Davidson. Today, I have a fantastic guest for y'all. Today, we have Dr. Jonathan P. Higgins, Dr. JonPaul. Dr. JonPaul is an award-winning educator, professor, national speaker, freelance journalist, thought leader, and media critic who examines the intersections of identity, gender, and race in entertainment. Named National Black Justice Coalition's inaugural Emerging Leaders to Watch and Business Equality Magazine's top 40 LGBTQ people under 40, their work has been featured on sites like Essence, Ebony, Complex, MTV News, Out Magazine, BET, and Entertainment Weekly. A Culture Strike 2021 disruptor, Black boy/girl rights fellow, and Twitter Spaces Spark creator, Dr. JonPaul is a trailblazer who is creating, sharing, and crafting the stories their ancestors didn't get to tell. Dr. JonPaul, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here.
You and I met at one of my audience's favorite people's parties, Francesca Ramsey, who also reviewed your book.
Yes. They have a quote on the back of my book. They called me the shady, funny cousin who speaks all the truth, but also does it in a really present, current way. And so I was so honored to get that blurb because it's so real. I'm one of those people that people can never, I always get that question. Like people are like, are you kidding? Or are you serious? And I'm like, most of the time I'm usually very serious, but I do it in a very, the plug, oddly specific way where, it may come across very funny or jokingly, but I'm like, most of the time I'm very serious. So yeah.
And in your, a lot of your work that you do, you talk about your family dynamic. And I was wondering, how has humor served you in the spaces that you've been in and navigating family and navigating life and career?
Yeah. So, I learned very early on in my life that, humor. So my whole family is, I say I come from a whole bunch of people who probably should have been stand-up comedians, but just never got on the mic. My mom is hilarious and my brother is even more funny. But for me, I've been that person that's been able to, I've learned that I can make people laugh when talking about very terrible things, and learning that that's the best way to get people to engage is to kind of do it in a jokingly way. I feel like the world is so super serious all the time. And so in moments that you can make people chuckle, or I've even had people be like, you're so funny, you should really make a career out of that. And I'm like, I'm like, no, I actually don't really want to be a comedian. But so I just learned that it really, it gets people to listen to you. I learned it specifically when I was in high school. I used to get teased a lot, and people used to say a lot of really mean things about me. And then when people learned, or when people would come around and find out that I actually was funny, or that I just had a way of kind of talking about things and it would get people to listen. I always had people in classes being like, yo, don't mess with him, he's funny, and that was kind of the way that folks kind of just saw me in school. After a few years, people just kind of saw me as the very smart class clown. And my teachers used to just let me go because I was smart. My grades were great. And so I never got in trouble because it was yes, they're funny, but they're also very smart. And so it was my teachers would just kind of let me go. But yeah, that was just kind of my way of making it in the world, was just learning that if I didn't use laughter, I would probably be sad all the time.
Humor is, it's wonderful. It can be a coping mechanism. It can be a shield. But it can be a connector as well. And that's so important.
Yeah.
And, obviously you had good grades.
Yeah, I did.
Because y'all, Dr. JonPaul holds a doctorate.
I do. Yeah. I do. You're probably say more about that.
I do.
Yeah, you're say more. I think the biggest thing for me was, so my mom was my mom was very serious about grades and education. My mom was always in the mind. She would always tell me very early on in age, she was like, you're going to be the one that gets the degrees. You're going to be the one that goes to school and does better than me. My mom has always said that. I want you to do better than me. And so even when I got to high school, my teachers, there were moments in high school where I had educators telling me, yeah, I don't think college is for you. I don't think that this, I had a lot of folks trying to discourage me from going to college, especially growing up in a religion that didn't see college as a thing. For folks who do or don't know me, and I kind of always introduce myself. People say, tell me more about your story. I always go, well, I grew up in a cult, so that's one, right? I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and for those of you who don't know, yes, it is a cult, and I've been saying that for the last few years because I think people, tried to say, oh, well, it's another just sect of religion. No, it's a cult, and so being in that cult, education wasn't something that was uplifted. And so when I did make the decision to go to college, because even though my mom was very, very a very devout Jehovah's Witness, she was also very, very devout in this idea that the only thing that's going to help Black people, get out of their oppression is education. And in some ways she was right. Like the more I learned, I live in a place now where it's like, oh, the more educated I am, the more of a threat I am to people. And that's why some people have a very hard time with taking me in. And I say that both collectively and career wise and everything else, right? I am a very smart person. And so I can always read through the things people are saying and that they're doing. I'm a qualitative educator, so I can always see the storyline playing out in all the things that I do. And so all of that to be said, though, it really did start with my mom, and my mom really pushing me. And so I honestly, I always say, and I talk about this in my book, I never believed myself as a smart person. It wasn't until I got to college that I met professors who were like, yo, you're actually very, 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 what's the word that folks would just say that I had a way with words. I would always get told that I was a really good writer, and hence why I have a degree in, comms, journalism, all of that. All the things I do, right, is a part of my journey. So yeah, it's a collective, there's a part of it is collective struggle, but part of it is also being encouraged by my mom. My mother it was and is and continues to be a very strong pusher of me doing the big thing.
Yeah, and I was watching about your story on your TED Talk, and so did your family convert to being Jehovah Witnesses, or was that something you were born into?
Yeah, we were born into it. So my grandparents, so my mother's father and her mother, right before her mother passed away, this was probably in the really, I would say the mid 80s, right around the time my brother, yeah, it was about 87, 88. Yeah, it had to be between 87 and 88. They were the ones who kind of got into it. My mom said that my grandfather, so the stories that were told about my grandfather basically used to run LA. And when I say run LA, exactly what you probably think it means, girl. My grandfather was a part of that life. And I guess one day after some, are we allowed to cuss here? After some shit went down, my grandfather basically, was, I guess, very much in the mind of like, I got to get right. I got to figure out my life. And the JWs came and knocked at the door at the right time and was able to start studying with my grandfather, and boom, everybody in the family became a Jehovah's Witness. And so my grandfather is his legacy in the org is what a lot of folks, if you are a part of the organization, my grandfather was what they called an elder. And so elders basically are the ones who run the congregation, right? They're basically like, if you're a part of the Catholic denomination, they're basically like a priest, right? They are the
Okay.
ones you go to. They are the ones who kind of, quote unquote, shepherd the flock. And if you can't see me, I'm doing quotations, right? And so all of that to be said, my grandfather was very, very strict on all of the things because my mother was still young. My grandmother was not doing well. And so there was all of these things and all of these factors that brought everyone into the JW org, and eventually it just became kind of everybody, both on my dad's side too. My dad's side too is also JWs as well. So yeah, I was surrounded by it.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I was watching you talk a little bit about how you had to unlearn and deprogram from that, and how much fear is in the folks who are at the seats of the table, who are doing the control, and people talking to you and encouraging you not to go to college. Probably, I would imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, because they knew that new ideas would spin in your head? I think you were thinking about living in the dorms. That was the
Yeah,
choice you
yeah,
were
yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah.
make.
So yeah, it was really, so I was just in a place of I really wanted to get out of my parents' house. That was just where my head was. And so I was like, what is the easiest thing to do? And so I had, so the story goes, I started in 2003, September 2003, I started college, and I didn't live on campus at the time.
We're the same age.
Oh, okay. Yay. Okay.
Exact
Come
same
on. Yes.
age,
Yes. Come on.
baby.
39, 35. Yes. 35. We are 35. How you doing? And so, yeah. So 2003, obviously, right. I'm driving I'm driving my 91 Mazda Protege back and forth to school. And, I meet people there, and I share and I've said this on other podcasts too. I meet these friends that I instantly connected with through my classes. We were all in the same classes together. And the happenstance was, when you're in classes together with people in college, as you probably know, or as anyone who's went to college, and you automatically start to connect with people, and you want to hang out with them after class. You do homework together, you start going over each other's houses and things. And so both of them lived on campus. And when I was going to their rooms to do homework and stuff, I was like, yo, this is mad cool. You get to do kind of whatever you want, right? And you're not having eyes on you all the time. And so it felt like a sense of freedom. And so when I started talking to my mom about it, my mom's idea was, one, you're grown, you can do whatever you want. But also, two, my mom was like, it's only 15, 20 minutes away. Like, I only went to school 20 minutes away from where I live. So my mom was like, I don't care. Go live on campus if you want. So when the brothers got wind of that, and I say brothers meaning the elders, when they got wind of that, all of the red flags went off, because they were like, why are you going to college? What are you wanting to live on campus for? I even had one brother who even said to me, and I don't even know if he's still alive, but he's basically said to me in so many words, if you go to college and you start living, quote unquote, that life, everything you do is going to fail. Like, everything is going to, if you don't have Jehovah, everything will fail. That's basically his words. And it was kind of this thing in my mind of like, okay, now I'm going to school scared, because I'm thinking, am I doing the right thing? But then also there's this other part of me that's like, I'm just tired of being watched. Like, I was on people's periphery. Like, I was literally being watched 24/7. And so it just became this thing of like, yo, I just want a little bit of freedom. And then he was right. I mean, this idea of like, oh, you're gonna get around the wrong people and they're gonna change your mind. I mean, it was actually, like I said, it was the same teacher who told me I was smart, was the same teacher who had me write a paper about what I believe. And I wrote a paper about me being a Jehovah's Witness and what I believe. And he gave the paper back to me, and he put an F on it. And he said, this is not what I asked you to do. And I was like, yo, this is what I believe. He was like, I understand that he was like, let me break this down to you, Mr. Higgins. He used to always call me Mr. Higgins. He was like, let me break this down to you, Mr. Higgins. He was like, I understand that this is what your religion teaches you to believe. He was like, but that is not what you believe. He was like, so I need you to go home and redo this paper and tell me what you believe. And when I tell you that out of that paper came this girl, like, it was literally like he had opened the floodgates for me, right? There were all these things that I had wanted in my life that I was being kept from, right? Like, I wanted success. I wanted to have a husband. I wanted, all of the things I have now. These were the things that I believed that I deserved and that I wanted. But I was being led to believe that I wanted something else because of this religion. And so, that's my long way of basically saying, like, yes, part of my journey is about that moment of me leaving the org, but it was also going to college that really kind of opened the door for me to be able to see, like, yo, there's so much more to life than this little kind of example or this little image that this religion is putting into my head.
Yeah. And I think, I'm thinking a lot about what you just shared, which thank you for sharing all that. And I'm thinking a lot about how right now, one of the headlines we're seeing in the news is that DEI programs are being pulled from colleges and universities, and how your story to me about, the elders and their fears and their feels like a micro example of what is happening at a bigger level. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that, and also like your thoughts on these DEI programs being pulled.
Like, wiped out. Yeah. So this is, I always kind of bring it back to this. I think, I know a lot of folks think when they hear DEI, they automatically go to race. But I think about it, I'm going to make a statement, and I want us to like unpack it from from all of the aspects of inclusion, right? So one of the big parts, and I'll say, of my platform, outside of being queer, outside of being Black and all the other pieces, right? A big part of my story is truth telling. And I like to call myself kind of like, and I say, even in my tagline, right, I'm writing the stories my ancestors didn't get to tell. I'm utilizing that as a method of, there are a lot of things that happen in our world that people try to hide or that people try to tuck under the rug. So I put that there. So the next, where I want to go, or what I want to talk about, is thinking about, let's go back to the time of enslavement, right? When we have all of you, and again, I know enslavement means different things for different people. There are different races that are included. It's not just about Black people. I want to make that very clear. My point and what I'm trying to make is, I always like to ask people, why do you think that slave owners didn't want their enslaved people to read, right? Reading means that you're getting another person's purview. You're able to make sense of things. You're able to think critically, right, about all of the stuff that's happening to you. So if we can tell an enslaved person that what's happening to them is normal, I hate that word, but normal, or that it's right, or that this is the way it's supposed to happen, and then this enslaved person gets their hand on a book, right, that tells them, no, yo, you deserve to be free, you deserve equity, you deserve to live outside of the parameters of this person who's enslaving you. Then you have this person who's sitting in the quarters going, what the fuck, like, how did like, why is this happening to me? I have the right to be out of here. And then specifically, right after 1876, right, when enslavement ended, you have, if the enslaved person is the enslaved master, or whatever you want to call them, is telling you that you don't have rights, but then you read it and you learn that you have rights, right? This gives the person the ability to plot and tell other people, yo, we got to get up out of here. So I always bring that back to this idea of what's happening with this whole notion of DEI, right? If we can stop people from learning not only the history, but the methods of white supremacy, the methods of, anti-Blackness, methods of, anti-feminism, all of the things, right, that tells you, white lady, that tells me, Black, queer, fat person, Asian person who's sitting in the corner, Native American person who has lived on land where they've been, slaughtered back in whatever time, right? Like, if we can keep people from learning that, then there's an essence of freedom. There's an essence of vernacular, right? I always tell people, before I got my doctorate, I didn't know how to talk about any of this shit, right? It was having a social, and I'm not saying you have to go to school to learn this, but what I'm saying is in my social justice program, we were reading a lot of stuff and we were writing about a lot of stuff. And so I had no clue what intersectionality was. I had no clue what anti-Blackness was. I had no clue what anti-fatness was. But it gave me the lexicon to be able to sit down and go, oh, that's what's happening to me, right? And so if I can keep other people from getting that lexicon, if I can keep other people from hearing those stories, then it makes them easier to control. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing, and I've been saying this and I'm gonna keep saying this, and then we can move on. I think what we're seeing right now is what I'm calling the last swipe at white supremacy. White folks, and I'm not saying specifically you, I don't know how you identify, but I'm saying in general, there is an essence of folks who sees and who knows that white supremacy is on its way out, right? And I believe in my heart of hearts, I may not ever get to see it, but it's gonna happen, right? I see it on its way out. And so you're getting folks like the person who's coming into office again, and all his little minions and all the people who give him money. They're doing anything and everything that they can to try to make people believe that we're the issue, that we're the problem. Because again, if you can put it off on us, it makes it easier for them to do what they're doing. And I think we're seeing a lot of people who are starting to wake up and recognize what's actually happening. So,
yeah. And, I just want to say, like, every single thing about our country, about our world is steeped in white supremacy. I benefit every single day from the structure of white supremacy as a white woman. I know that, like, I benefit from white privilege. It's very much a real thing. And I also think that if that statement makes you uncomfortable as a white person, if it's uncomfortable for you to say, like, that you benefit from this structure of racism, that you benefit from white privilege, you have to step back and figure out why it makes you uncomfortable. Because I'm okay with going with less. I know that, like, my life, the way that it has been set up, whether it was my grandfather getting the GI Bill, just start there. And, you know, without that, I wouldn't have had my parents wouldn't have had the opportunities they had. I wouldn't have had the opportunities I had. And so when you find out the way that, you know, Black and brown people did not qualify for that GI Bill, start there, folks. If that conversation makes you uncomfortable. You talk about your ancestors. You have this fantastic book that's coming out that everyone's going to pre-order because it's going to be in the show notes and we're going to be posting about it, and pre-orders are super important.
My
Um,
God.
and I'm wondering if there was, you know, I
Mm.
know in your book you talk about some incredible people, but I'm wondering if there is a person you talk about in your book that you didn't know about as much before, that once you started learning about them, you were like, everybody needs to know this person's story. How is this person not known? Is there someone like that in your book?
Yeah, so I will say this. Everybody who's in my book, I've always known about. I want to start there. And I want to preface, I kind of want to like start this conversation with this notion of my book didn't come from a place of, oh, I didn't know these people. Like the world has to know them. My book is actually from the parameter of, I don't think I would be here if these people didn't exist. I talk very openly, trigger warning, I talk very openly about suicide in my book, specifically in chapters 5 and 6. Well, actually 4 through 6. I talk a lot about what it was like to be on the wheel of, I like to call it the wheel of suicidality, right? And living with, and I still live with it, right? This idea of ideation. And I really got into, like, I really wanted to write about that because I think we talk, and that's the thing with like DEI and all of these things, right? And representation, right? That's what I've been saying in the last few months is, we've kind of gotten lost in the sauce with representation, right? I think people don't really understand, or people have not gone back to the basis of why representation is so important. Specifically in my chapter 2, I talk about Andre Leon Talley, and I'm thinking about this. Let's go back to my story, right? So I grew up my entire life as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm 13, living in, San Bernardino County, growing up in a single parent household. My mom is at work every single day. My mom worked 2 jobs her whole entire life, and my mom still works. And and I'm pretty much at home by myself a lot. And so if you or anyone else has dealt with, suicidality or ideation, right? Your thoughts go a mile a minute, and you hear this voice that's constantly telling you, nobody loves you, nobody likes you, nobody wants you here, die. That's like constantly what you're hearing. And so I'm hearing this in my head from 13, 14, and 15. No one's ever going to like you. No one's ever going to find you beautiful. No one's going to ever, like, I'm hearing all of these terrible things in my head from the way the world is treating me, right? From the teasing at school, to my family teasing me, to my uncles being hard on me, to, all of these questions that people are asking my mom about me in my presentation, right? There's all of these things. And then I see Andre Leon Talley on TV and I go, that's me. That's me,
Right.
right? And so what does that do for me as this 13, 14, 15-year-old kid who's tuning into America's Next Top Model? Not for the models. I'm tuning in because I see Andre Leon Talley on my screen representing me. And so it's almost shit. I'm getting sort of emotional. Same thing happens with Real Housewives of Atlanta, right? I'm in college, I'm dealing with all of this stuff, and I talk about it in the book. And I'm believing again, nobody loves you, nobody wants you, you'll never be beautiful, no one will ever celebrate you. And then I see Miss Lawrence, right? Then I see Miss J, or Miss J Alexander, right? I'm seeing all of these people who look and are living like big lives, and how much inspiration that's giving me. And so that's really where my book comes from. My book is really this, I wouldn't even say an ode, but it's really just kind of this thank you to them, right? I wrote the book like right now because, after after Andre Leon Talley passed, I was thinking to myself, I don't want no more of these people to leave this earth without knowing that I celebrated them. And so I've sent it to all of them. I've said, hey, if y'all want to read it, here you go, right? This book is me celebrating you and your legacy because no one else has. No one else has. And I want you to know that you've kept me on this earth. And so I'm hoping that through my story and through their story, that we can start spreading this message around to other Black queer kids, especially going into the world we're about to go into now, telling them like, yo, you have legions of people who've come before you, who have set the blueprint, who has set the mark, who's giving you directions on how you can be your most authentic self in a world that's telling you that you can't, right? So that's really where Black Fat Femme comes from.
That's so beautiful. I just want to pause because it's so beautiful. And I didn't know as much as I should have known about Andre Leon Talley until after they passed away. And I knew them from reality TV because I was a big America's Next Top Model stan. I remember them on The Hills. They had an amazing moment on The Hills. But then what really solidified it for me was Rihanna's performance. And that is when I really started to dig in. And when people were, first of all, when they were criticizing Rihanna, I will never stop talking about that. Like that Rihanna performance where they put a Black woman above all of the people in the NFL, which is like, to me, the NFL is a league that profits off Black bodies. And like that moment of power, I'll never like forget that one.
Yeah. You're like, I'm never going to live that down. I know that's right. Yeah. I feel it.
And so, right now there's a lot happening in the pop culture zeitgeist, etc. always. But there was this thing I wanted to talk to you about because I'm like sort of fascinated by this. Okay. So we've got a lot coming out about what happened on the set of this movie, It Ends With Us, with Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. And, there's a lot of conversations that probably need to happen around that. But what I want to talk to you about is the specific thing that I found, because I was going through the lawsuit the other day and I found basically it's a one-sheeter that they had, that it was the press scenario planning. And it was about how to, approach this movie in the press. And I know you've been on Netflix shows, you're all over the place. You're a big deal. So when I saw it, there's a lot of stuff that's like, yeah, this is the producer, this is whatever. But I want to show you this one question, or read this one question to you. And it said, any questions that come up about lack of diversity in the cast, this is what you should say. We have such a wonderful cast who brings something unique in telling this powerful story of one woman learning to take agency over her future. I'm so proud to be a part of an incredible group of women who have made this film that is inspired by Colleen Hoover's own deeply personal story. So that is how they were told to address. And I would love to just hear your perspective on that. And also, too, I think it so gets at to like you watching America's Next Top Model and why it actually matters. Because if I make a video about this, and it's fine, you guys can say whatever the hell you want. You'll say, it doesn't matter, Meredith. Like, it's just one person's story. It's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. And if you could like walk us through that for a minute.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of want to unpack this because this is kind of layered. I think, one, we have to address the idea that they put this in the press packet, that the person who put this in the press packet has to know and understand their privilege enough to be able to say we have to figure out how to spin it. So that's the issue I've always had, is that we constantly have people in positions of power and privilege, and knowing that and understanding that in these positions to kind of keep fueling white supremacy. So I always like to kind of say this, like the onus for ending. I have so many thoughts and I'm trying to like really kind of just like walk myself through them. It's interesting to me because the conversation always starts with, so I'm gonna throw it back to something and then I'm gonna bring it back here because I know it probably sounds like I'm all over the place.
No, that's
I always think about this. So I'll say this. I remember when I first started kind of like when I first started laying out kind of my own blueprint of how I was going to approach the industry. I remember a specific director, and I won't say who it is, I'll tell you offline, who basically jumped in my DMs and was like, if you're so angry at the industry for not having your stories, you need to write those stories. And at the time, right, I hear it. Okay, I will. I'll do that. And then I get here, 2024, and I go, wait a second. Or actually, not even 2024. I was like, maybe 2022. When I started to slow down on trying to kind of, quote unquote, crack the code in this industry, I started recognizing that's just one of the ways that they make us run around in circles like a chicken with our head cut off. by telling us that we are the reason why the industry is not inclusive, right? Well, the industry is not inclusive because you won't give me a job. You won't give me the opportunity to tell my story. But yet your job, or what you keep telling me, is, well, you created, you do it, you do it, you do it, right? And so now you're putting the onus of quote unquote de-whitening. This is, I don't know if it's a real word, but de-whitening the industry, right? Now it's back on me as a Black queer creator. Like, so my point to that in saying this, right, is the person who wrote this, they know and they understand what's happening in the industry. And to make it seem like it's our issue or our problem, they've taken their eye away from it, and they've said, instead of us actively saying, you know what, we know we need to tell more inclusive stories, we know we need to open the floodgates, we know we need to, we no, not even floodgates, we know we need to open the door, we need to give someone a seat, we need to give someone a paper and a pen, or even give them access to final draft. Because let's talk about that, right? You love to tell me, so this person, oh shit, I want to say their name so bad, but I know I can't. Can you bleep it? So tells me this. And instead of saying, I'm and I have a whole fuck ton of money and I'm going to help you, because let's talk about it. So I want to talk about what does inclusion, what does representation really mean, and what does it look like? Tells me that I need to go off and create it, right? He never asks me how much money I have, what resources I have. He never starts there. He never says, okay, well, you know what? You need to tell your own stories. And so how I'm going to do that, or how I'm going to help you in helping you do that, is I'm going to give you a code to final draft. And I want you to meet with me on Wednesdays at 5:00 so I can show you how to use it. Right. That's what he could have done, but he didn't. But then you have someone like Stephen Canals, who is the creator and writer of Pose, who did exactly that, right? Who said, I see you as a Black queer creator really wanting to break this industry. So not only am I going to teach you about the industry, but I'm also going to give you access to final draft, and I'm going to teach you how to use it the right way, how to build your story out the right way, how to storyboard, how to outline, how to build your A story and your B story. And then I'm going to also talk to you about how do you actually build a thorough world and then character, right? So that's my long way of saying they know there's an issue. They know there's an issue, and no one wants to be held accountable for it. All of what I just shared is that. And that's what the industry continues to keep doing. They keep saying, oh, there's a problem, but I don't want to be the one to fix it. Why? And this is what I keep telling people. If they knew that they had, so say for instance, they didn't put that clause in there, right? And someone goes out and they see Blake Lively. She sits down all cute in her seat. And the first question on that press tour, it was Blake Lively, right? That's her name?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure I'm using the right name. She sits down in her chair all cute. And then you have some creator or critic like me sit down and say, so Blake, tell me why ain't no Black people in your movie. What is that? That's another PR person you have to pay. So I always tell people that this, what it comes down to is nobody wants to fix the problem because it costs money. It's going to cost, it's a job that they have to pay someone to do. And then that person, so now we have this person come in and says, y'all got an issue with inclusion, but y'all also got a problem with Blackness, and you also have a problem with anti-queerness, and now that's an HR issue, right? So now they're wrapped up in more work. So the easiest way in this is just to say, divert it back to the story. Let's just keep it back at the story.
This is how we had to tell it. This is just one person's experience.
It's just one person's experience.
This is such a good answer. And oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts on all of what you just shared. But I think one of the things that happens when you do cast, create, conceptualize with an eye towards, inclusion, etc., is that it's going to mean that white people have to take a step back. And that is something that, they don't love. It's not necessarily something that, and that also probably means that you're going to have to spend more money, but also you're going to spend maybe less money cleaning up your press mess, right? Like, this movie has turned into a mess. And the interesting thing is, I have so many problems with McKinsey, But, I think it was 2018, 2019, their data came out that the most high performing companies were companies that had more diverse people in top leadership. Now, to me, I'm like, it shouldn't all be about the profit, but it's like, if we know that if the companies that do the best are the ones that have the most representation at the top, and I'm not talking about like the one white woman, okay, guys, like I'm talking about real representation. And that's about ability, that's about, everything. So I think that's interesting to think about. And I would also say, going back to your story, that is such a cop out when people just say like, "Oh, well, then you make it. If you don't like it, change the conversation."
And you don't give me any resources to do that.
It's asking for free labor.
T. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is so much of what I think white supremacy is like completely based on, right? Is about
Slavery.
right.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. So when
Uh-huh.
someone says, well, why isn't there a movie like, a movie like It Ends With Us, but it has well, then you write it. You write it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, but that's just going to take me time and energy, and I'm not Blake Lively, and I don't have a hair care brand, and I don't have I'm not married to Ryan Reynolds, so I don't have all these things in place. Like, she has benefited from so many structures of white supremacy.
Yep.
And she had her wedding on a plantation, y'all.
The jokes write themselves. That's let's start there. The jokes really do write themselves, right? But yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, you're right. You are
it's just
so right.
It's just so interesting. And, I can I ask you one more question? Because I feel like this is my other pop culture thing that I saw, and I'm going to read it to you because you talk a lot about self-care. So the first thing I want to ask you is like, how is self-care showing up for you right now?
Girl, let's talk about it. The way that I said, whoo, my God. So for those of you who are listening, we are recording right before the Christmas break. And I have literally told anybody and everybody, don't ask me. Even my husband last night, I swear to God, he thought I was playing. Yesterday I sat on that couch, was watching TV, and there were dishes in the sink. There was trash in the trash can. And he was like, yeah, the trash has to go down to the trash. And I said, okay, take it down there. My entire mood for the next couple of days is get somebody else to do it. I ain't doing shit. I'm not touching nothing. After this podcast, don't ask me for nothing. And no shit. The only reason why I was yes, I'm excited and I want to be here, and I want to make that very clear. But very much in my own life, I'm telling other people, I am so sorry, I can't help you with that. All I ever do is do for everybody else. And so I think the biggest thing for me has been, how do I take back my time and enjoying myself, right? And spending time with people. Like I'm going to go have lunch with a friend, and and then I'll see some more friends on Wednesday, and I'm seeing family. But I'm being very intentional to make sure that I'm taking the time this break to really truly unplug, to not be doing, because usually my number one thing is, the Christmas, like I did that last year. Oh, the Christmas break is here, so let me start working on my, my not my pitch, but let me start working on on this movie or this show that I'm writing, or let me work on this pitch deck that I'm putting together, or let me work on. No, I'm not doing any of that. Y'all can wait till after January 6th. If you need anything from me before then, you just have to ask Jesus for it, because say a prayer.
So like, boundaries can be self-care.
Very that.
And I love that. And that's why I want to sort of wrap on this. I don't know if you know this, but Goop is in trouble. Goop is
the only
not
thing
doing
I
well
know
these
about
days.
Goop is, didn't that lady go on EBT for a week and she said she couldn't do it, so mother darted out of the EBT office? That's the only thing I know about that lady. I don't know nothing else about her, but I do know that she was on EBT. And for those of you who don't know what EBT is, it is basically food stamps. She was on food stamps for a week, and she basically, in so many privileged words, was like, how do people live like this?
She was also buying like 9 limes at a time. I was like, what do you have, scurvy?
Right. Like, girl, what are you doing? Yeah, bitch, get some cereal. Buy some oat milk. What are you doing? Yeah.
So, one of the things that she's parlayed her career into is to be this person who has a celebrity brand called Goop. And, there's a lot of products, etc. And it's very much, I think, based in beauty standards that uphold whiteness, which, like, I'm going to be the first one to say, like, yeah, I probably, fit a lot of those. I have blonde hair. I'm a white woman. Like, yeah, but I, Goop is not doing well because I think people are kind of, like you
Not
said,
her being
this
Goop.
is right.
Yeah, go off. Go ahead.
But her advisor, Julia Hunt, one of the a Goop advisor, Julia
My
Hunter,
God. My
said
God.
this to Puck.News. Gwyneth is the arbiter of how you take care of yourself. The point of self-care is to feel better and do whatever makes you feel better. It doesn't need to be a solution, which I agree with, for all of life's problems. It's not snake oil. Is Gwyneth Paltrow the arbiter of how we care for ourselves? Or is she just really fucking rich?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. So I want to say this, and I'm probably going to get canceled for saying. Now I see why that man left her. I can't. He probably said, "I can't put up with this lady no more." I think it's. The math is mathing. I genuinely, I think it's so. And this is, why the things that I do for myself to take care of myself, I'm not very vocal about. And what I'm talking about is like, there are moments where I'll be on a website and I'll just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna buy it. And I just push buy, or, there are moments where, for instance, like, I mean, I don't talk about this all the time, but I have a Massage Envy, membership, and I will go and I will save my points and I will get a 90-minute massage, right? Just to give me that 90 minutes that I need for myself, right? To just debrief the world that I live in and the work that I do. But I like to tell people, right, like, do what you need to do for you. But the reality is that so many of us can't. And I think that's the thing. Like, I even me, like, so like part of my quote unquote, someone could even say part of my self-care is, sitting down and truly writing that movie or writing that show I really want to write, and working my hardest to get the show to be in tip top shape so I could sell it, and getting a manager and getting an agent and blah, blah, blah. Like that could be considered self-care, right? Like me giving myself that time. But I'm also looking around and I'm going, I live in Southern California, so who's going to pay my bills? I work a full-time 9 to 5, at a nonprofit. I also do some consulting on the weekend to bring in extra income. I have a podcast, and then I have to like do all of this press stuff around my book. So where in the time, like I'm working close to 55 to 60 hours a week. I'm literally working that. Where in that am I supposed to sit down and really truly get into the what is it, the minutia of really truly devoting? Like, there's a privilege in being able to quote unquote create that way. And I have to tell people that, like, there's such a luxury that we tell people this in the industry all the time. Well, make sure you're doing the thing. You have to do the thing. But no one ever talks about all of the other stuff that happens around that thing for people to just be able to survive. So I think to tell someone that they should be able to do whatever they want as self-care is such a, like, it's so rooted in privilege, because again, not all of us are in a place to where we can quote unquote do whatever. If I really want to do whatever I want, I would go rob a Louis Vuitton store.
I know. Gwyneth Paltrow's probably already done that.
But I'm just saying, like, that would be self-care for me, is walking in and snatching all them bags and running out. But you know what else? I'd be plucking those colognes and those perfumes, because those bitches smell good. They're expensive and they smell good. But they smell like money. So like, I'm just saying, like, that would be self-care for me. Self-care for me would be walking around and slapping these people who got Trump stickers on their car. Like, that's self-care to me. But I can't do that, right? Like, I know by law I don't want to go to jail for assault. So I'm just saying, like, we've got to become, like, as much as I'm joking, like, we've got to be cautious about how we talk about self-care to people, especially people who are not in a place of privilege that affords them that luxury to be able to quote unquote rest.
Yeah. And rest, there's a lot that shows that rest is some of the best self-care that we can do for ourselves, but rest unfortunately is a privilege, which is like absolute bullshit. So my very last question for you is, what word are you walking into 2025 with? A word or a phrase?
I was not expecting this question.
If you need if it doesn't work for you, that's okay.
No. I have something. I just don't know how to put it into a word or a phrase. I was extremely. I'll say this. 2022 and 2023 really fooled me into thinking that 2024 was going to quote unquote be my year. And this year, honestly, like, yes, I sold a book, my podcast won an award, like, there are all of these things, like, I'm like, yay, success, right? Whatever that means. But this year, for some reason, was probably one of the hardest years that I've ever had, not only as a creative, but I think just as a person. Like, I literally at points would be laying in my bed and looking at the clock and being like, girl, you got to get up because you got shit to do. And I know it's depression. I know it's and I'm on meds, right? Like, I still take medication,
Same.
to keep my mind together, but I'm still dealing with that. And so I think for me going into 2025, I'm just kind of going into it being like, it is what it is, like, I think for me, it's like, I'm kind of going into next year with no expectations, because I don't want to set myself up for what I set myself up for this year. Like, this year, like I said, when I say it was hard, what I mean by that is like just this constant feeling of like nothing I'm doing is pushing the needle further enough for me to find the success I want. So I don't know if the word is ease. I don't know if the word is whatever, but I'm really just going into next year just kind of with my hands up being like, let's just see what this year gives us. And you've dealt with hard before. You could deal with hard again. It's just kind of shoulder shrug. I guess that's it. I'm going into next year with a big shoulder shrug of like, buy my book me for shit. If you hear me and you got a podcast, girl, I would love to come on and talk shit with you. If you want to work with me, to my agent basically quit me this year. Basically, it's like, I'm leaving the industry. I'm out of here. So I'm agentless, about to release a book. Yeah, it's
okay, folks.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, there's
no, plug your shit. And I also want to just say this.
Yeah.
I know there's a conference that you want to attend.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. Creating Change. I'm going to Creating Change next month on my own dime. Like, I had to pay for it for myself.
Kick you some Venmo, some PayPal, some Cash App.
Yes, at Dr. JonPaul on all of them. But
we will link all of this.
Please, like, that's what I'm saying though. Like, that's the thing that no one seems to really understand about being a Black queer creator. Being a Black queer creator is like, and I said this before I came on this podcast to myself. I said it's constantly like, I feel like I'm constantly having to beg people to see my livelihood and to see my story as valid. And I think, you mentioned this when we came into this, going into 2025, people, you asked me the question, why are pre-orders so important? Pre-ordering a Black person or a Black queer person's book before it comes out, why it's so important is because publishers don't pick up, like, there were 5, 6, 7 different publishers who passed on my story, who said that this story is not relevant or like important enough for it to come out, right? Like, people were basically saying there's no money in this, right? There's no money. We're not going to see any money in this. And when you pre-order, you're basically telling the publisher, actually, yeah, there is a lot of money in that. Right. There is a lot of money in our stories and a lot of money and people needing to hear someone like myself. So, and I tell people, like, I'm not doing this just for me. I'm doing this for everyone who looks and lives like me, so that way they know they can do it too. And so I think that's, why I say all of that, to say, like, it's important for folks to know that, but also it's important to tell your people that you work with. If you work with an agency and you like what I'm saying, or you like the fact that you like what I'm doing, tell your agency, we need to support Black queer creators more. We need to represent them more. We need to open doors for them more. Like, that's the stuff that's how we get rid of this terrible world that we're living in, is by using whatever privilege we have to uplift others who are not in the room, who don't have access to the room. Right. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, back to your original question, where am I going into 2025? I'm just riding a wave. I'm not making no big expectations. I'm not putting nothing out there. I'm gonna keep doing what I've been doing. I'm gonna keep trying to survive and thrive in a world that is not built for me. So,
well, we are here to support you. Thank you. We're gonna put all of your links in there. And right now, I am gonna pledge $50 to your conference. And
thank you, honey.
It's tiny, but I want to make sure that have your coffee on me, because those coffees are important.
You'll be paying for gas because I'm driving my Black ass into Vegas for this. So yes, you will be helping me with gas. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
And, if other folks are in the position, let's do this, because this is how we actually build real change. I know there's a lot of great organizations you can donate to, et cetera, but this is the stuff that actually really moves the needle. You guys know that I worked in nonprofit spaces for 15 years, and I lived to tell the tale, and I saw a lot of shit. And the best way that we can actually create change sometimes is not just writing the check to the nonprofit, it's to giving it to the person to make shit happen. So we will do that. And then just remind everyone your book and where they can find you.
Yes, yes. So you can find me on social medias. My at is at Dr. John Paul. I know for Blue Sky, I changed it to drjohnpaul.blue. So that's where you can find me on Blue Sky. I'm no longer on Twitter. My podcast is no longer on Twitter. If you love the podcast, you can listen to us, Black Fat Femme. Or if you love listening, I should say, if you love listening to podcasts, and I'm just so grateful. Like I said, I'm so thankful and grateful to be here. If you want to hear more from me or people like me, you can head over to the Black Fat Femme podcast. We release new episodes on Tuesday. Every Tuesday, you'll get a new episode. We've had a lot of really fun people on the show, and we'll continue to do that. And it's really cool because we, at one point, we're like, oh, we're not allowing anyone who's not Black or fat or femme to be on the show. But going into next year, we're kind of opening it up, and we're just saying we're trying to build a community of supporting everybody and anybody. And so I'm gonna return the favor to you, Meredith. I'll be in your inbox asking you to be on our show too, so that way we can just have more kikis and talks. But yeah, the podcast is really just we're really focusing on uplifting voices and really trying to change the scope of media. And then lastly, my book comes out March 25th. You can pre-order now. You can pre-order it anywhere you get your books, anywhere and everywhere. And if you do go somewhere and say, hey, I want to pre-order this book, and they don't have it, you can tell them to request the book. So the book, Black Fat Femme, Revealing the Power of Visibly Queer Voices in Media and Learning to Love Yourself, being released by Wiley. This book, Gabrielle Union endorsed it. I had no idea that was going to happen. So I'm really, really excited and thankful that she and her people saw the value in this book, and I'm hoping that you do too. So,
Well, I'm going to pre-order it. I can't wait to read it. I can't wait for us. And I also know that I know I have a lot of educators on here. If you buy more than 30 copies, I know you offer to come and visit with folks. And so just want to put that out there too, because sometimes it can be really helpful to have that companion piece to reading a text and to digging deeper into it. So y'all, let's make 2025 the year that Dr. John Paul is booked and busy. Booked
please,
and busy.
booked with the book, honey. And like I said, I will come to your school and shuffle and dance and do a little 1-2 step while talking about the importance of this book. But yes, please, please, please pre-order. And again, thank you, Meredith, for seeing me and for seeing my work, and thank you for having me here. I'm really, really thankful, and I enjoyed this conversation more than you'll know. So,
oh, thank you. Well, thank you for being here. Y'all check out Dr. John Paul at all the places linked everywhere. Thanks so much for being here.